Hello, my friends. It's Monday, September 1st, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in my undisclosed mountain hideaway in the beautiful state of Jefferson region of Southern Oregon.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
On this week's Smoke Session, it's back-to-school shooting season. America pauses the Epstein files for a weekend at Donnie's. Gavin Newsom effectively trolls Trump. Zoran Mamdani holds a massively successful scavenger hunt. Democratic congressional leaders call on Lucy to hold the football again so they can kick it. Republicans honor an insurrectionist, dishonor a crosswalk, and put soldiers on garbage duty. A legendary hero cop was a wife-beating murderer. Idaho's school lets poor kids go hungry, and why there's been no mass uprising in the United States. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for three quick hits. And first up, it is college football season. I was so excited to get the season started with a Thursday night opening game live on ESPN, nationally televised. The 25th ranked Boise State Broncos going down into southern Florida, into Tampa, to face the Bulls, and boy, they stunk. Oh my God, what a terrible, terrible game. It kind of shows how much Coach Danielson was relying on number 2 Ashton Jeanty last season, because the Broncos, after scoring 7 points in the opening quarter, gave up the next 34 unanswered points, losing 34-7, the worst loss in the 2-year Spencer Danielson coaching era. One of the worst losses by Boise State as a ranked team. They've lost 3 times in the past by 27 or more points as a ranked team to an unranked opponent, and back-to-back the 2 worst losses in Boise State history going back to the 90s. They lost that playoff game to Penn State, and then they lost this one to Southern Florida. So not a good look for my Boise State Broncos. Let's hope they pick things up against Eastern Washington FCS team. Boy, if they lose to them, it's going to be a real downhill slide this year. Also wanted to note a sad occasion this week marked the 35th year since we lost the amazing blues guitarist Stevie Ray Vaughan, who died at the age of 35 in a helicopter accident. And boy, of all the people that I regret not going to see, that I had a chance to see perform live, it's Stevie Ray Vaughan. He had a concert in Boise at the Morrison Center that was notable for the fact that it literally blew the roof off the place. Well, not literally, but it blew their sound limits. They had like a decibel limit for the Morrison Center there, and Stevie Ray said, "Screw it, find me all you want," and played loud as hell, as I was told by the people that went to that show. And it wasn't long after that he did pass away. Man, can you just imagine Stevie Ray Vaughan at 70 years old now, and all the amazing music he would have given us? He had just managed to get clean and sober after having such a terrible problem with drugs and alcohol. He had turned his life around. He had released that hit album. He had gone on to record with David Bowie on that Let's Dance album, and people were beginning to recognize him outside of the blues genre. And then his life was cut short in that helicopter accident. Meanwhile, every single member of Motley Crue still walks the earth. Also excited to note that we've got a new sponsor here on the Radical Russ Show, a great concert lineup. You may have heard me previewing a few times if you follow me on my Blue Sky account at radicalruss.com, and you follow me for the hashtag AT40, where we listen to American Top 40 replays from the 70s on Sirius XM's 70s on 7 channel. You'll probably recognize this festival that I made up in my mind.
Get your tickets now for the greatest music festival of all time. It's FOMO-YOLO Fest 2025, featuring the greatest artists of yesterday and today, performing live or posthumously via hologram. FOMO-YOLO with the Go-Go's, Toto, Poco, Lobo, Dido, Devo, Taco, Falco, Wilco, Coolio, Radio, Oingo Boingo, Jojo,
Siwa,
Mojo,
Vixen,
Jocko,
Stories,
Rico, Yo-Yo, Kembo,
Brian,
Eno,
Perry,
Como, Coco,
Montoya,
Coco,
Taylor,
Nico,
Case,
Nico, Tito,
Jackson,
Tito,
Quentin,
Bono,
Sonny,
Bono, and Yoko Ono. FOMO-YOLO is brought to you by GoPro, Oreo, Rolo, Polo, Lego, Ego, Fago, and Four Loco in Mono-Fano. FOMO-YOLO dates in Cicero, Elko, El Paso, Fargo, Fresno, Frisco, Hilo, Kokomo, Kosovo, Kyoto, Lesotho, Orofino, Orono, Oslo, Pago Pago, Pocatello, the Poconos, Provo, Pueblo, Reno, Socorro, Quito, Tokyo, Waco, and Yolo. FOMO-YOLO.
It's the start of the school year, so that in the United States of America means it's the start of school shooting season. We just had our opening school shooting in Minneapolis at the Assumption Catholic School, where the kids were beginning their opening mass. They're in their pews praying when a gunman with a semi-automatic assault rifle stood outside of the church, having tried to barricade the doors, and shot through the stained glass windows, killing 2 and injuring 17. And as usual, when we have one of these terrible mass shooting events, we have the typical parade of conservatives on the right-leaning talk shows offering every excuse in the world as to why this terrible thing happens only in the United States of America and nowhere else in the world, offering all the same excuses of mental health and video games and violence and lack of prayer in schools and everything else except for the one thing the United States differs from all the other countries, and that is our easy availability and access to weapons to kill people with. And a typical reaction that we got was on one of these Fox shows. They had the Secretary of Health and Human Services on there, Robert Fuckwit Kennedy, he of the brainworm. And of course, they wanted to push very, very hard on the fact that this shooter apparently was transgender or was transitioning or had detransitioned. It's kind of unclear at this point, but let me play the clip for you.
The one thing is clear. You are dealing with a person who's trans, that was transitioning. Are you going to be examining at all some of the drugs that are used in order to make that transition happening, to see if it plays a role? Because we also know there was a trans shooter in the Tennessee situation.
Setting up the softball question there for Kennedy, are you going to look into these transition drugs that the trans kids use to transition? You know, the puberty blockers and these other transition drugs. Can we blame it on the trans kids? Is it the trans problem? Could it be the trans? Boy, I tell you, Fox News, if you're really worried about the 4 mass shootings that have been recorded in the United States that have been carried out by transgender people, you're going to be really shocked to hear about the 4,000 or so mass shootings that have been carried out by cisgender white boys. But surprisingly, Kennedy wouldn't take the bait on the trans drugs angle because he's got his own particular drug angle to push.
Yeah, we are doing those kind of studies now at NIH. We're launching studies on the potential contribution of some of the SSRI drugs and some of the other psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence. You know, many of them on there have black box warnings that warn of suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation. So we can't exclude those as a culprit, and those are the kind of studies that we're doing.
Ah, yes, the antidepressants, the SSRI drugs that, you know, are not prescribed to anybody else outside the United States of America, apparently. Apparently no other country has this problem with these kids that take these SSRI drugs with the black box warnings about suicidal and homicidal ideation and shoot up their schools in Korea or in Japan or in England or in Canada or in Mexico or just about anywhere else you look. I guess nobody else has SSRI drugs. Of course, that's ludicrous. Now, is there some sort of connection, maybe? Okay. Let's say there was. Let's say you do find a connection between these SSRI drugs and mass shootings. Secretary Kennedy, what would we do about it then? Ban the SSRI drugs? Take all the SSRI drugs away from everybody, even though most of the people using the SSRI drugs are not doing any sort of school shootings, not harming anyone, and actually gaining a whole lot of benefit from having those SSRI drugs. Why, it almost sounds like you're trying to ban an inanimate object rather than take a look at what the problem might actually be with the guns. Yeah, you always tell us with the guns, it's just an inanimate object. We can't be banning an inanimate object. You can't be blaming just an object, can we?
They have multiple interactions with authorities, with their schools, with the principals. Why is something not being done? Instead of blaming an inanimate object, which is the weapon, how about addressing the human being instead and giving them aid, giving them psychological support, giving them an off-ramp? That's what needs to happen. We need to stop the violence before it occurs.
That's one of the president's advisors, Sebastian Gorka, on CNN, explaining how we can't blame the inanimate objects. We got to stop the violence before it occurs. We got to get these kids some mental health help. And then Breonna Keeler goes on to point out that HHS went and cut all of the mental health help for that Minneapolis school district, and we're cutting all sorts of mental health benefits from people all over this country. So you can't really say it's a mental health problem and then take away all of the tools we have to help people deal with their mental health problems.
This is not a time to politicize these issues. We mourn for the families, the community that's affected there.
That's Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, again reminding us that so soon after one of these mass shooting tragedies, we can't rush to politicize what's going on. The only problem, Speaker Johnson, is that these mass shootings happen so often, there's no gap. There is no time that we can address this without politicizing it that hasn't come within a few days of the most recent shooting. And it's so disingenuous here to say we don't want to politicize this when politics is exactly how we've gotten into this situation. It's the politicization of the gun issue, the extremes on both sides of this issue that refuse to try to negotiate some sort of settlement here, some sort of ceasefire in America's gun violence epidemic that's killing 40 some odd thousand people a year in this country. But all people like Mike Johnson have to offer are the thoughts and prayers.
Well, it's incredible to me that Jen Psaki and Gavin Newsom and others would attack religion, diminish the faith of millions of Americans at a time of such great tragedy.
These kids were shot while they were praying. They literally had the thoughts and prayers on their side at the time they were being gunned down. And nobody is demeaning the religion, the faith of people out there who want to pray for a better solution here. But faith without works is dead, I seem to recall somebody mentioning a few years back. Yeah, you can pray all you like, but if you don't make any changes, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change in this country. We're going to see next week another shooting, and next week another shooting, and next week another shooting until we do something about the easy access to guns in this country.
There are a lot of common sense solutions, things that can be done to protect children at schools and in churches that do not involve taking away the constitutional rights of law-abiding American citizens.
You know what? I'm glad Speaker Johnson brought that up because there are lots of common sense ways we could approach the gun violence epidemic in this country that's killing 40,000 people a year. But we on the left need to come about this in a little bit smarter way. because we're still locked into this dance that happens at every school shooting, this little dance that goes on between the left and the right, where, and maybe this is where me being a red state refugee can bridge the gap between these two sides, because I grew up in rural Idaho with uncles that are hunters, and I was in the National Guard, and I hung around with people who are ex-military and very much into guns, so to speak, going out and shooting and having fun with guns. And then on the other side, I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I was a progressive talk radio host, and I've heard a whole lot from the liberal side about what we ought to do with guns. And I find that we're just kind of trapped in this little political dance that we're never going to escape out of unless one side finally comes up with a better way of dealing with this topic. So stick with me here, folks on the left, because I do believe the folks on the right actually have kind of a point here when they talk about the inanimate object and blaming the inanimate object, because we come around every time this happens on the left and we start saying assault weapons ban. We got to ban assault weapons. We got to have an assault weapons ban the AR-15 and all the AR-15 like guns. And then we point to the fact between 94 and 2004, when there was an assault weapons ban, there was a reduction in all these shootings. And after the ban expired, the shootings went back up. There's no doubt that that's, factual. But when you say assault weapons ban, when you say ban, the first thing you do is you activate in that right wing that constitutional right argument. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And to the righties who are gun aficionados, it comes across as collective punishment. It comes across to them as, well, since some whack job in Minneapolis, some nut, went and took an AR-15 and shot up a church, you in Texas, law-abiding veteran who's never hurt anyone in his life, who enjoys collecting weapons and going out and firing them on the range, you who've been responsible for 40 years, you who store your guns safely and put them in a cabinet, you who teach your kids gun safety and to never be reckless with firearms, you who pay attention to all of your weapons and where they're stored and keep them safe and keep them out of kids' hands, you need to lose your gun. We need to take your gun away because someone else 1,000 miles away was a nut job. That's how it comes across to them. It comes across as collective punishment. Also, it's not something that's likely to be effective at this point. There are now 400 million guns in the United States of America, a country with like 330 million people. There's like 120 guns for every 100 people. And about 100 million of us own these guns. So even if you ban the assault weapons, like if you absolutely stop the manufacture of all new assault weapons, there'd still be a whole lot of them floating around in America. So how do we approach this without going back into this dance of it's too soon to politicize, thoughts and prayers, you're trying to ban guns, Second Amendment, and then the next thing you know, nothing happens? How do we get out of this macabre dance? And I think part of how we can do this is on the left, we need to change our approach and to actually take these guys at their word when they say it's not the guns, it's not the inanimate object, it's the mental health. Okay, let's take you at your word for that. Let's make it about the mental health. And let's change the perspective and the framing that these aren't guns that are so dangerous that nobody should have them. Let's change the perspective to these are the kind of guns that only the manliest men can have. Only the strongest, toughest, manliest, manly men can have the AR-15. Make the totem something to aspire to rather than something to fear. And then attach to accessing that weapon qualifications that have to prove your health, your mental health, and your manly fitness to use the gun. What we need to do here is to leverage the macho attitudes of most gun owners so that they see themselves as the strong, proud protectors of the Second Amendment, that keep out the crazed lunatics who would make the rest of them look bad. Now, I have an idea for this, and I think, you know, I don't have the exact plan of how to enact this. You need people with far greater legal minds than my own and far greater political minds, but I have an idea of the direction to go. And that is to go back to that Second Amendment that they revere so greatly and revive the first half of it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. They seem to have forgotten the entire first half of that amendment. Now, I know on the left, when we talk about that well-regulated militia, a lot of people on the left say, well, that's our National Guard. We have a state National Guard. That's our militia, and they're well-regulated, that they can have those weapons, and then no civilians should have them. That's not going to work. That's not going to work, even though I agree with the historical accuracy of it and the origins of the Guard and so forth. But it's not going to work to solve this problem of hobbyist gun owners, gun aficionados out in the civilian world that are going to own and use these weapons. So let's revive the militia idea, but let's make it militia light. Let's make it National Guard light, State Guard light. Let's make it the County Guard. The county militia. Set it up so that we have such a thing as a militia card. And to get your militia card, you got to go to your county sheriff. And with your militia card, you can buy AR-15s and the sort of ammunition that goes with them. We'd leave, you know, pistols, shotguns, things for your own personal defense. You won't need a militia card for. Personal defense, that's your Second Amendment right. But then offense, personal offense, an offensive weapon like an AR-15, those things require a militia card. You got to be a member of the militia. And with great power comes great responsibility. Part of the militia card is that you got to go in every year. You got to get your eyesight checked. You got to do a marksmanship. You know, you got to hit so many targets. They do a psych eval. They do a background check to see if you had any domestic violence, you know, issues going on or any violence issues going on over the past year. So, you know, not too dissimilar from getting your, like here in Oregon, I had to get my concealed handgun license, and it wasn't too dissimilar to that. I had to go into the sheriff's office, fill out some paperwork, you know, supply my fingerprints. But it wasn't like the National Guard where you got to show up every 2 weeks, you know, or 2 weeks a month and a weekend or whatever to do your drill, and you have to wear a uniform and all that military crap. Not like that. But a county militia where, at the very minimum, the county sheriff knows who you are, has got your fingerprints, knows where you live, you've gone through a psych eval, you've gone through background checks. Make that a gatekeeping to the AR-15, getting your militia card. And then make it, you know, through marketing. And, you know, there was that was it Browning, the gun maker, that had that ad, "This is your man card," you know, with the semi-automatic weapon, right? "This is your man card's been issued." Well, make the militia card the man card. And you said it with that status, you know, give them 10% off at the Applebee's or whatever, or, you know, a discount at the gun store. I don't know, but you promote it in such a way that, hey, being in the militia is like being in the cool kids club, being in the macho man club. I got my militia card. Did you get your militia card? And so all these AR-15 guys can continue being AR-15 guys. They can continue having their fun shooting up, you know, cans in the desert, whatever the hell. But we've got tabs on them. We know who they are. We know they've passed a check. You know, this may not solve all the problem, but I think at least having tabs on some of these people, and I think we could get around the fear, the right-wing fear that the left is coming to grab their guns. No one's coming to grab their guns. We're just coming to ask you to prove you're man enough to have one. Are you man enough to get your militia card? Are you man enough to be responsible for an AR-15? Use their macho against them. And use it in such a way that when they see a school shooting and it's carried out by somebody who doesn't have their militia card, it further promotes, let's go get the militia cards and let's do more checks to make sure the kids without militia cards don't have their guns. And then you make it also so you can't open carry your gun unless you've got your militia card. I don't know. I keep thinking this has to be the solution, that the solution to the gun issue can't be a blanket ban that's going to convince most of the people affected by it that they're being collectively punished for the bad acts of a few. But it also can't be the right side of thoughts and prayers and doing absolutely nothing in the face of all this carnage and violence. Let's set up the county level militia and also, this county level militia maybe could be something the sheriff could call up from time to time. And then when there's a disaster, a flood or something, maybe something that doesn't rise to the level of calling in the state National Guard, but, something that was somewhat a problem that we need some help for. You call up your little county militia people. Have them show up. Let's tie some responsibility to the great power of gun ownership. The big story on the internet this weekend is the questioning of the health of Donald John Trump, who was incommunicado for about 5 days there. People hadn't seen or heard from him. It's really amazing when the guy hasn't openly, blatantly defied the Constitution for a few days. Everyone thinks he must be dead. And so all the memes were going around, the Weekend at Bernie's memes and the investigations on the bruise on his hands and the swelling on his ankles. And then yesterday, apparently a photo was put out showing him getting into the car to go to his golf course, but he's wearing a big old hat. It was a distant shot. You couldn't see him very well, and what you could see didn't look so good. And then later on in the weekend, they tried to they posted a photo of Trump playing golf with John Gruden, the former coach in the NFL, to show, he's playing golf with John Gruden. Everything's cool. Except the photo had been taken over a week ago. So, not really tamping down the death rumors there by posting the old photos. I also saw some notes from some of the people I follow online over there in Kyiv, Ukraine. They said, hey, United States, welcome to the Is the Dictator Dead watch that we've been enjoying for Putin and Lukashenko for all these years. But even before we got all of this questioning about his whereabouts and his silence, there's been a lot of questions going around about his health and his mental health, including because he was talking about wanting to get into heaven. He sure hopes he gets into heaven. Maybe he realizes his days are numbered, but and also this continued begging and pleading to try to get himself the Nobel Peace Prize. The reason he wants the Nobel Peace Prize is because Barack Obama has one. And he can't stand the idea that Barack Obama would be better than him in any way. So he's got to have the Nobel Peace Prize, as his press secretary calls it. In fact, he thinks he deserves it for not just solving one war, but 10.
I'm not happy about it. And I'm not happy about anything having to do with that war. I settled 7 wars, and actually, if you think about pre-wars, add 3 more, so it would be 10. I thought this would be in the middle of the pack in terms of difficulty. No, I'm not happy about anything about that war.
Yeah, he's not happy about the war in Ukraine. He thought it'd be easy to solve. He'd fly out there to Alaska, have our troops on their knees rolling out the red carpet for the butcher Putin, with Trump standing on the tarmac, clapping like a toddler, excited to see daddy come home from work, kissing the entirety of Vladimir Putin's ass, allowing him to ride in the presidential limo, the Beast. And you should have seen the picture of Putin in there grinning, like, oh my God, I can't believe what an idiot this guy is. Who knows what kind of bugging devices Putin might have put in there. It's not like Putin doesn't have this kind of background in spycraft. So, yeah, completely kiss Putin's ass, get him there to Alaska, and got nothing. Got absolutely nothing. No ceasefire, no concessions, no sanctions against Russia, nothing. Nothing has changed at all. And he's realizing he's impotent on the matter here. But talking about solving 7 wars and 3 pre-wars. We can solve pre-wars now. Of course, he can't name any of these things that he solved. And the people that he talks about, India, Pakistan, for example, are like, he didn't have anything to do with us doing a ceasefire. I don't know what he's talking about. The guy has lost it. He's gone mental. And everyone can tell. You've already got J.D. Vance talking about, yeah, well, if anything were to happen, I'm ready to step in on day one. Gosh, nobody asked J.D., but funny that you bring that up. So the internet had this moment all throughout Labor Day weekend. Is he dead yet? Is he dead yet? Unfortunately, he is not. And, I got to give a slightly controversial opinion on this. I'm glad he's not dead. I know. You'd think I'd want this guy dead, but I do not. I do not want Donald John Trump to die. At least, not in the Oval Office. I would be fine with him dying in a prison cell, in a Supermax federal facility. I would be fine with him dying in exile in Dubai or dying in exile in Russia. But I want him to suffer. If he dies right now as president, he won. He got away with it all. He got away with everything. I want him to live long enough to lose his office. I want him to live long enough to be prosecuted. I want him to live long enough to go to prison. I want him to live long enough to see his name become synonymous with fraud and treachery and abuse. I want his name to become an epithet. I want him to see his family suffer. But if he were to kick off now, I guess maybe that's the best we could hope for. Do you think it would stop the MAGA movement, though? Do you think him dying in office wouldn't turn him into some sort of martyr? And that in the future, as we uncover all the terrible things about him, that would just go over the heads of the people that worship him? Yeah, I don't know if I want him to die just yet. I'd rather see a little bit of justice come for him. Because we ain't forgot about Jeffrey Epstein. I know, we had week after week after week, it was all the main story, and then we had all these leaks coming out about the Epstein and the birthday book, and all these different things were happening, and then as soon as Ghislaine Maxwell got moved to nicer digs, all those leaks stopped. Isn't that interesting? We haven't had much new coming out on the Epstein case since she got those fancy club-fed booking there. Interesting, isn't it? But we ain't forgot about Epstein. We're going to continue to hold feet to the fire, and on the 3rd, I believe, on Wednesday, Congressman Ro Khanna is having a press conference with many of the Epstein survivors to discuss the situation, and that's one of the frustrating things to me about this, is how much the framing on this has been, we need to see the Epstein files to determine whether or not the 26 women who have already credibly accused the president of sexual assault and the one woman who successfully sued and had a judge adjudicate the fact that she was sexually assaulted, and then twice awarded defamation verdicts for him lying about having sexually assaulted her, and a 2005 audio from Access Hollywood where he openly brags about sexually assaulting women. We can't believe all that until we see it in some file somewhere. It's like everybody's got this attitude of video or it didn't happen. Like, until we actually see the video of Donald Trump raping a 13-year-old girl, we can't believe the testimony of that 13-year-old girl, Katie Johnson. That's how far we've fallen in America. We won't actually believe 27 different women unless there's video to back it up. All right, time to turn to my left and see what the Democrats are up to in this country. And boy, Gavin Newsom has been hitting it out of the park lately. Now, before we go too far in this, listen to my progressive listeners out there. I'm not a huge Gavin Newsom fan. He's terrible on the transgender issue, terrible on the homeless issue, terrible on the crypto issue. I got a lot of issues with the guy. But I have no issue whatsoever on how he is taking the fight to Donald Trump online. His posts of late mocking Donald Trump's all caps, multiple quotation marks, multiple exclamation marks, parenthetical statements, all of that has been a joy to watch. Mostly watching all of the right-wing pundits freak out over it. Trying to say, Gavin Newsom's trying to copy Donald Trump, but that just shows how authentic Donald Trump is. How can the governor of California be saying things like this? He's got a serious job. He should be more serious. And, of course, everyone, independents and Democrats, looking at saying, finally, someone holding a mirror up to these lunatics and showing how nuts Donald Trump is in his postings. And they can't say much about it because it's what he does. It's brilliant. I'm really, really happy about it. But this should be a note to other Democrats about how to take on this fascism. And mocking is a big part of it. Governor Wes Moore got on board with this. The governor of Maryland, when Trump was talking about putting troops into Baltimore, and Wes Moore says, Baltimore has become a much safer city, and I invite you to come on a ride along, walk through our city, and Trump disregarded it, and then Wes Moore called him President Bone Spurs. Said President Bone Spurs was afraid to walk, maybe we can get him a golf cart. Yes, this is exactly the way. Make fun of him being fat. Make fun of him being lazy. Make fun of his makeup. I really wish, seriously, that Democrats would hold a press conference sometime and all of them, well, white Democrats. If white Democrats would show up to a press conference sometime with all of them with that orange face on. Just come and don't mention the orange face, right? Just come on with this bright orange, just like Trump does, don't blend it in the lines on the side or anything. And just try to do a serious press conference, one right after the other, stepping up with orange face on, just to see how the media will react to that. Because what we want to see from Democrats right now is fight and creativity. We want to see Democrats who are willing to fight, and we're wanting to see Democrats willing to be creative about doing that fight. And Gavin Newsom may be on the right side of my progressive political spectrum, on the far right side, but he is on team fight and team creativity. If you want to look on the far left side of my progressive political spectrum, who's joining the fight with creativity, it's Zoran Mamdani. Zoran Mamdani, who had this wonderful idea of a New York City scavenger hunt that all the clues to the scavenger hunt had to deal with public transit and former mayors and the history of the mayoralty of New York City. So it kind of tied in, showing he's not that different from other people who have been mayor, and the progressive background of the city and Fiorello LaGuardia and all of that. So it was brilliant from a marketing perspective and from a creativity perspective, and by all accounts was a huge success. So many thousands of people showed up for this scavenger hunt in New York City that they ran out of the cards for the scavenger hunt. And Mamdani also took the tack of mocking, the mocking tack that you need to do against these fascists, because prior to doing the scavenger hunt, there was this story that came out where one of Eric Adams, the current mayor, the former Democrat, former NYPD guy who's like running fourth right now in his reelection campaign. He apparently had one of his staffers meeting with a reporter, a city reporter, and slipped this reporter $160 bribe in a potato chip bag, a sour cream and onion potato chip bag. So to open the video where he announced his scavenger hunt, it opens on a picture of a trail of sour cream and onion potato chips on the road, and then it pans up to where Mamdani is eating a chip and says, "Oh, hi there." Just totally making fun of the Adams campaign in that nice, subtle way. That sort of creativity and this willingness to bring the fight to these people, to call them out for what they are, is what the Democratic Party and Democratic stalwarts and voters out there, and many independents who want to see this come from the Democratic Party, want to see an actual opposition, actual fight from the Democrats. What do we get from our congressional Democrats instead? What do we get from Jeffries and Schumer, who I like to call the Cuckteau Twins? Well, folks, we got another letter. Yes, that's right. Jeffries and Schumer wrote a letter to Republican leaders requesting a meeting to avert a painful, unnecessary lapse in government funding to address the healthcare crisis Republicans have triggered in America. What is your proposal to fund the government in a bipartisan manner and avoid unnecessary harms to the American people? Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are writing letters to the Republican leaders asking what they will do to avoid a shutdown and not hurt the American people at a time when they are shutting down Health and Human Services and the Centers for Disease Control. Well, RFK is banning. They are going to ban the COVID-19 vaccine for most people in the United States. Where they're talking about coming out in this month, and you know they're going to do it, and going to say that vaccines cause autism. They're going to purposefully try to get as many people in the United States to die as possible from not getting health care, from not getting the right amount of vaccines. We got Trump setting up troops in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, threatening in Chicago, threatening in other black mayor-run blue Democratic cities in blue Democratic states. And you think they want to come to the table to talk about not harming the American people. That's what you think. And in the meantime, while this is going on, Secretary Noem from Department of Fatherland Security has already talked about how they're going to put out a $100 million funding coming out of FEMA, funding for churches to upgrade their security, to have security gates and fortifications. They're already starting to wall up their local forts in the war of Christian nationalism that they are bringing to us. They are already arming up against the American people. Every one of those mega churches you see, which so conveniently seems to be located near a major freeway exit. What a great staging place for the onward Christian soldiers of the future to gather together so they can put together their patrols against the, against the trans, I guess, against atheists, against liberals, whatever they might be fighting. But Jeffries and Schumer still think we're in 1995 and it's time to send letters back and forth and work on bipartisan solutions to averting a crisis. When will you guys pull your head out and realize we are in a cold civil war? This is a civil war. We are currently in a civil war right now. They are pulling troops from red states to patrol blue states. The time for sternly worded letters and appeals to bipartisan cooperation are over. It's time for both of these guys to step aside. From now on, no more New York or California Democrats in charge. Give me some Midwestern Democrats. Give me some Democrats from states like Maine. Guys, like this fella. His name is Graham Plattner, and he is running for Susan Collins' seat in the state of Maine.
We need to bring the Democratic Party back to the party it was supposed to be. It is supposed to be a party of working people. It is supposed to be a party of unions. It is supposed to be a party of community organizations. It is supposed to be a party that fights for the downtrodden and the exploited. It is not supposed to be a party that supports the corporate interests that have always supported the Republican Party.
Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, this is the way. Democrats, since 2016, have been slow to heed the populist movement in this country from the left. For some reason, Bernie Sanders turning out massive crowds in places like Boise, Idaho even, didn't convince them that, hey, maybe there's some populist uprising on the left going on here. Maybe we ought to start listening to what our Democratic base would want us to do. No, the Democratic Party was so allied with its think tanks and its money donors and its tech bros and its law firms and its donations from AIPAC that they could not and would not heed the populist uprising. So, of course, Donald Trump did. Both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats in this country, and independents, people in general in this country, have long felt that this government doesn't work for them, that it doesn't do anything for them, that they don't matter. And so Democrats did not heed that call. Republicans did. And that's how they've gotten Donald Trump into office, not once, but twice, because with the election of Joe Biden, it was once again the Democrats turning on the populist uprising. Because you'll remember that 2020 primary, Bernie Sanders came out of the gate and won the first two primaries, Iowa and New Hampshire. And it wasn't until the whole rest of the field, under the leadership of Jim Clyburn, the octogenarian from South Carolina, all got together and said, hey now, Kamala and Elizabeth and Pete and all the rest of you who are running, you all need to drop out and get behind Joe Biden. Because if we all don't coalesce behind one, we'll split the vote between all of us, and Bernie will get all that progressive vote and he'll end up winning. And then, he'll lose, of course, to Donald Trump, which I don't think would have happened. I think Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump, not just in 2020, but in 2016 as well. Because that's the direction most of the populists want to go, is fighting the 1%, the massive wealth inequality in this country, a country where a minimum wage full-time worker cannot get a two-bedroom apartment in any county in this country, where the dream of home ownership is all but dead for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, where the minimum wage hasn't gone up since 2009. And before we give Barack Obama the credit for that going up in 2009, it was slated to go up then anyway. That was the next scheduled increase. So it's not as if he did a whole lot of heavy lifting to get that to happen. The minimum wage now won't even buy you a pound of lean ground beef in most of America. So Graham Plattner in Maine has the right idea, and that is run against the Democratic establishment. If you're a Democrat running for office right now, you should be running against Hakeem Jeffries and against Chuck Schumer. Take advantage of the fact that the Democratic Party's ratings now are in the toilet, somewhere around 25% approval ratings, and run against that. Run as taking over the Democratic Party. Run as returning the Democratic Party to its roots of labor and unions and progressivism and standing up for the little guy, championing the oppressed, fighting for the working class. Ditch those high-level donors, forego the super PAC money. Barack Obama proved in 2008 that you could run a campaign based on little donations, getting a whole lot of little donations. So Throw those AIPAC donations overboard. Get rid of those donations from the big tech giants. Call on the people to power your campaign and make promises for the future that the Democratic Party will divest itself from all these big money interests. That is the way to rebuilding democratic power in the United States. All right, time to turn to my right and see what the Republicans have been up to these past 3 weeks. And first of all, I got to mention that the U.S. Air Force is set to give a full military honors funeral to Ashli Babbitt, the January 6th insurrectionist who tried to cross a barrier to get into the House where the Congress people were in fear for their lives from the mob, and she was shot and killed by a D.C. police officer, who Laura Loomer would like to remind you was a black D.C. police officer. She said black with the hard R even. But Ashli Babbitt's going to get a full military honors funeral, and her family is going to get $5 million from the U.S. taxpayers for all their pain and suffering from their daughter being a traitor and getting shot for it. Full military honors. Now, my grandfather was buried with full military honors. He served in World War II. Maybe you've got relatives that were buried with full military honors, and maybe you've got that tri-corner folded flag in the little case sitting on your mantle. Just think about your relative and their sacrifice and the honorable sacrifice they made for this country. And when you look at that flag on your mantelpiece, folded up, that once draped their coffin, know that the family of Ashli Babbitt will be sitting in their 10,000 square mansion that they bought with their $5 million taxpayer money, looking at the same sort of folded flag on the mantle beneath their big screen TV. Ashli Babbitt, the traitor who stormed the Capitol with a mob with the intent of ceasing the peaceful transfer of power, possibly lynching the Vice President and Speaker of the House to stop Congress from certifying the election of Joe Biden. That woman who got shot for trying to do that bit of treachery has the same honor, the same respect from our government as your relative who got that flag draped on their coffin too. I don't know about you, but if I were in charge of this, and maybe I'll talk to my mom and her sisters about that, I'd be mailing that flag back. I'd be taking that tri-cornered flag, putting it in a UPS parcel box, addressing it to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, and letting him know that my relative who served honorably in the United States military refuses, and their family refuses, to share this honor that has been sullied by giving it to an insurrectionist traitor. We will no longer share that honor. You can have your flag back, Pete. The other Republican we got to look at is Ron DeSantis, the governor down there in Florida, who has ordered the Florida cops, or the Florida Highway Department, I guess it is, to paint over the Rainbow Crosswalk that is on the state road near the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, where 49 people were gunned down in another one of our mass shootings. How petty are you? How homophobic and anti-gay can you be that you have to paint over a rainbow crosswalk that was made in honor of shooting victims? How disgusting to demean the memory of those 49 people who lost their lives just having fun dancing at a club, thanks to your politics, Ron DeSantis, the kind of politics that Floridians stand for, that guns should be available to everybody at all times with no background checks and no waiting periods, and have as many as you like and buy all the ammo you like and nobody keeps track of it. Got to paint over that crosswalk. Now, kudos to the people of Florida who then went and painted it back as rainbow colors, and then it got painted over again, and then they went out with chalk and chalked it up again, and now DeSantis has 7 state troopers guarding the crosswalk. Couple of cars off of one side, couple of cars off the other side, big signs on A-frames at either side of the crosswalk. Do not deface the crosswalk. Do not loiter, blah, blah, blah. Boy, they'll really put out all the law enforcement, try to stop painting a crosswalk, but try to stop a school shooting. No, nothing we can do about that. Got to paint the crosswalk. I've got the solution for this, by the way. Part of the solution is, number one, the reason that DeSantis can have the Florida Highway Department paint over that crosswalk is because that crosswalk is a crosswalk that abuts a state highway. So he's got like state authority over that highway, right? If you take that crosswalk and move it about 50 feet down the street, so it's kind of in the middle of the street, actually closer to the Pulse nightclub, make it a crosswalk in the middle of the street. If it's in the middle of the street, it's no longer on that state highway. It's on Orlando City property. And I don't think the state has the authority to paint over city crosswalks. So just move the crosswalk 50 feet. Another solution, every time they paint over the rainbow crosswalk, paint a new rainbow crosswalk somewhere else. Every time they paint it over, paint 2 more. Make it so that, you don't want one rainbow crosswalk around Pulse? Okay, you're going to get 50 around Epcot Center or something. I don't know where. I don't know Orlando that well. But you get my point? If they won't let you have one, start putting them all over the place and put them far away so you can't schedule cops to be watching all of them. Make rainbows appear everywhere. And someone's actually kind of sort of took me up on this. I saw a post that came up where there's a pothole. And this guy says, since Florida Department of Transportation only pays attention to things that are painted rainbows, let's paint a rainbow around every pothole. So they did that, this little round pothole with a rainbow over it. That's kind of a good idea, too. I like that. And the other Republican thing I wanted to talk about here was the stationing of these National Guard troops in D.C., who we've seen just wasting time standing around the Lincoln Memorial, walking through Georgetown, bugging drunk sorority girls. It's kind of a joke, but it's also really serious that we've got these troops. It's setting us up to normalize the idea of just seeing troops in our streets. Like that's something you're supposed to see. And now lately they haven't had much for them to do. So they've had them going around and picking up garbage and spreading mulch. Because, we went and fired all the National Park Service people that do that. We fire the National Park Service people, and then we bring in the National Guard to do what they were doing. I want to see that recruiting commercial. Those recruiting commercials you see for the Army, where, it's a young person, late teens, and let's say they're in a busy emergency room. And they're a doctor in an emergency, or a nurse in an emergency room. And the scene, it's got all the doctors and nurses and stuff working in what's an emergency room, but then a mom or a dad in their just regular clothing talking to the nurse saying, well, I don't understand. Why do you want to do this? And the nurse kid says, well, I want to get my exposure. I want to get experience, and this training will help me get a job in the real world. Well, I don't know if you should do that. And then the scene switches, and it's not the kid in the ER. It's a kid on the battlefield as a medic, right? And the point of the thing is like you can join the Army and you get this skill as a medic, and then you can take that skill later on and use it in the civilian world as a nurse. Like, make that commercial, but with garbage pickup. Have the mom or dad following the kid. He's got his overalls on, slamming a can into the car, into the garbage truck, Well, why do you want to do this? I want to get the experience I can have for a job in the future. And then the scene switches and it's the kid in his BDUs picking up trash in DC. That's the recruiting commercial I want to see. And the other thing I want to see as a protest, like you got all these guys marching around, these troops, 4 or 5 of them, strolling along the Washington Mall, or strolling by the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial, right? I want to see someone put together a squad and dress them like the squad in the Bill Murray comedy Stripes and have them do the whole razzle-dazzle drill and ceremony scene from Stripes near these National Guard guys. Like, walk alongside them. Round up, round home. Boom shaka-laka-laka, boom shaka-laka-laka, boom shaka-laka-laka, boom. Son, where's your sergeant? Blown up, sir. Am I to understand that you've been guarding these monuments all by yourselves? Monument guarding, sir. Just make fun of them. Make fun of the troops the same way we're going to make fun of Trump and all these Republicans. Embarrass them. Make these National Guard people feel stupid and embarrassed about it. And they already do. Trust me, they already do. Because one of the things that we found out this weekend, Trump activated these guys for 29-day cycles. Now, you military people know what the problem is there, right? Let me explain it to the non-military people. When you're in the National Guard, if you get activated for 30 days or more, you get full housing benefit allowance and meal benefit allowance. Basically, you get the benefits you would get if you were active duty, right? You get meals and housing and all that kind of stuff. If they activate you for 29 days, you don't get that. So all these troops who are already having to take time off of their jobs when they get activated like this, who now have to come and do drill in Washington, D.C., getting paid less as National Guard troops than what they're probably getting paid in their regular jobs, and then only get that for 29 days so that they don't get any housing or benefits. So they're still paying all their rent at their home, wherever their home is, or they've been pulled, whatever red state they've been pulled from. They're not getting their income from their job. Some of these jobs will fire them. Now, that's illegal, by the way. You can't fire a National Guard troop just because they've been called up to active duty. There's laws against that. But laws. What are laws in this country anymore? So some of these kids are going to come back to, maybe they won't be fired. Maybe they'll be cut back in hours. There'll be something, because the bosses back home, they know this is bullshit too. Well, I'm down 2 guys in my staff because they're out picking garbage at the Washington Monument. This is bad all around, and with a little bit of mockery, we can make it worse. Taking a look at a regional story here in America, we head down to the state of Tennessee and the legend of Buford Pusser. Now, if you're Gen X like me, that name rang a bell loud in your head about a movie called Walking Tall, which was the story of Sheriff Buford T. Pusser. And as the story goes, Sheriff Buford T. Pusser and his wife was on a ride along with him in his cop car when he was called to this church on a call, and when they got there, it was an ambush. See, Buford T. Pusser was this tough-on-crime sheriff, and he had taken down a bunch of guys in the mob, organized crime, and so the mob ambushed him, set up this ambush at this church, and fired all these shots into the car, and ended up killing his wife and wounding Pusser. So that's when Pusser went on his rampage and went after organized crime. And this all got immortalized in this 1973 film called Walking Tall, the tough but fair sheriff with a zero tolerance for crime. Now, the shooting happened in 1967. Wife was killed. By 1973, they've made a movie about this guy. And this is one of you weren't there, but you can't understand what an effect Walking Tall had. on the culture in 1973. Because, you know, leading up to the 70s, it was all cops are pigs. You know, it was the reaction to the 68 Chicago convention with cops busting heads and all the civil rights protests. Cops were not popular in the late 60s, early 70s. It wasn't a thing, right? We were pretty anti-cop in this country. But then this 1973 film, Walking Tall, comes out about Buford Pusser being tough on crime. And this was like one of the first examples. I mean, yeah, there'd been Dragnet, the TV show, and One Adam 12 and all that. But this is one of the first examples in cinema of what we call copaganda. This lionization of these hero cops that are tough on crime and these evil criminals. So 73, Walking Tall comes out. It's this huge hit. Many, many cops talk about it being the inspiration for them going into law enforcement. Pusser died in 74. He died in a car wreck. And his legend lived on through the movie. And it even got remade in 2004. So there's a remake of Walking Tall. So Buford Pusser, Walking Tall, tough-ass sheriff. I think he carried a baseball bat. I think that was part of his shtick. Anyway, turns out it was all bullshit. Yep. Buford Pusser was completely full of shit. McNair County Sheriff was going through cold case files and says that if Pusser was alive today, prosecutors would present an indictment to a grand jury for him killing his own wife. Yeah. They uncovered, they started digging into the case files, and they found that a lot of the things that Pusser said happened in the event were kind of contradictory. He had a lot of contradictory testimony. And then the physical evidence wasn't quite right. For example, Pauline, his wife, was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, allegedly, when the mob opened fire and shot all the bullets into the car. And yet they found some of her blood spatter outside the car on the hood. Kind of hard to get from inside the car around the windshield and onto the hood, isn't it? And what they find from the physical evidence is he likely shot his wife outside the car and then put her body into the car and then fired a shot against himself that grazed his cheek, right? So he shot himself to make it look like he set up a crime scene. He completely faked the crime scene. The case was largely built on Pusser's own statements. And since he was the sheriff, they just closed. Oh, well, sheriff said this is what happened. That must have been what happened. Cops, they just went ahead with that story. They also found when they exhumed Pauline's body that the trauma to her head didn't match any of the crime scene photographs of the car's interior. The gunshot that Pusser got on his cheek was from close range. He shot himself at close range. He wasn't fired from outside the car. And they found that Pauline had a broken nose that had healed prior to her death. And statements from people who were around at the time said that she was a victim of domestic violence. So there you go. Buford Pusser, Walking Tall, 1973, lionized as this tough on crime, no nonsense, zero tolerance, bad guy sheriff going after the criminals. Turns out to be a wife-beating murderer who lied about the crime scene and managed to have that lie stand for over 50 years. And in the meantime, inspired legions of cops to join the force. The entire file on Buford Pusser is being released by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. It's about 1,000 pages. They're handing it over to the University of Tennessee Martin. It'll do some redactions, and after that, it will be online, searchable database. We can finally learn all the truth about Walking Tall and Buford Pusser. That sound, the country bass line, means it's time for our regular Boycott Idaho segment where we explain all the reasons why you should avoid the handmade state. Now up to 73 reasons. You can find them all at radicalruss.com/Idaho. And today's reason for boycotting Idaho is one that I hear all over the country, so it's not necessarily specific to Idaho, but it's happening in Idaho, so it's pissed me off and I've got to talk about it. It comes to us from the McCall-Donnelly School District in central Idaho. Beautiful place in the country. I'm telling you, it's up there on the Payette Lake. Just gorgeous. But anyway, the McCall-Donnelly School District has announced that any child there whose school lunch debt exceeds $20 will be cut off from any further school lunches. And boy, does this piss me off. I was a kid in the Idaho school districts, and I was poor. We grew up in trailers. We ate government cheese. We had food stamps. And at my school, we had reduced price school lunch tickets. And it was a situation where, like, if you were the regular price school lunch kid, you got a red ticket. And if you're the reduced school lunch kid, you got a white ticket. And so all the kids in school would know that they were the rich kids or we were the poor kids, because here I was with my little white ticket. On the days when I could have a ticket, there were some days when we couldn't even afford the reduced price lunch ticket, and I would just go hungry. So whenever I hear the term school lunch debt, it infuriates me. It infuriates me that in this country, as rich as we are, that we not only force teachers to have to buy pencils and paper and glue and markers and all the school supplies, but that we force kids to have to pay to eat while they're there. If somebody forces you to be somewhere, they should have to feed you. You have to go to school. It's required. So why do we not have free lunches for all the kids? I don't have kids, but I understand the people that do have them love them. But it doesn't look that way to me when I see schools that don't feed their kids. Or worse, schools that do feed their kids but don't feed all of them, that don't feed the ones who are struggling financially, that set up this lifelong feeling. And trust me, this lasts I'm 57 freaking years old, and I still feel the shame from being the white ticket lunch kid to not being able to afford the things that my friends could afford. It's just disgusting that we set this up in America anywhere. Idaho, you're not exempt. So maybe someone can explain to me what we need to do, what the problem is, why this is so hard to solve, that we can't feed every kid in school. What kind of country are we? These people that talk about us being a Christian nation, really? Suffer the little children, let them come unto me? That Christian nation, right? That lets kids go hungry when they're not dodging bullets in school? Shame on you, McCall-Donnelly School District. Feed the damn kids. Today in the Radical Rant, I want to talk about a question I saw float through Blue Sky the other day, and it was from someone in Europe. I'm imagining France, since they're so active in their political uprisings. But it was a person wondering, how come in America, with all this stuff that's going on, waves hands at everything, with all this stuff that's going on, how come there are not 30 million people in the streets? How come there's no mass uprising in the United States of America against all the stuff that's going on with the fascism that's creeping in? How come we're not shutting it all down? I have some theories to this. First of all, when we narrow who's not shutting it down, let's narrow it down a little bit to white people. Black people are quite good at protesting. Hispanic people are quite good at protesting. They've been carrying the load for years and years now, and I don't blame them this time around for sitting it out. Right? I've seen that meme going around Black Sky quite a bit of people saying, hey, white folks, you got us into the situation that we're not getting you out this time. It's all up to you. So I kind of agree with that sentiment. But why aren't white people up in a mass uprising, taking to the streets, shutting it down, going on strike? Why is that not happening? And my theory is that we've been trained to not believe we have any impact. We've been trained to believe that it's useless, that nothing we do will make any difference. And it reminds me of, I'm reminded of that study that came out a few years back where they took a look at what the people want versus what Congress does. Like, policy X is wanted by 80% of the people. What's the chance that Congress will enact policy X, right? And then they broke this down by the policies that the top 1% want, lower capital gains in the estate tax, whatever. And then the policies that the lower 90% want, like, raise the minimum wage or, universal child care, whatever. Doesn't matter. Policy X, the stuff that the 1% want. Policy Y, the stuff the 90% want. And what they found when they analyzed this is that there was a fairly correlative relationship between what the 1% wanted and what Congress did, right? So like if only 10% of the 1% wanted something to happen, Congress probably wouldn't do it. But if 90% of the 1% wanted it to happen, it was pretty likely Congress was going to do it. Then they took a look the same thing at what the 90% want, and they found absolutely no correlation whatsoever. If all the 90% want something to happen, there was about a 30% chance it would happen. If none of the 90% want something to happen, there's about a 30% chance it would happen. If half the 90% want it, about a 30% chance. No matter what we want, there's about a 3 in 10 chance that Congress will do it. But if the ultra rich want it to happen, it's going to happen. So this has kind of trained us politically to think that we have no power, that our politicians don't work for us, they work for donors. And boy, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries do everything they can to help illustrate that, don't they? So there's this belief that what we do doesn't matter. And there's also kind of a lack of understanding what's possible. Like, we go into these things thinking, well, if we do X, then they'll do Y, then we'll do Z, and they'll do this long string of things will happen. So when people think about that, they think, well, okay, so what? We go out and protest and we say that Trump is bad and terrible. Then what? What's he going to do? Just leave office? No, he's not going to go anywhere. So what's the point? That's kind of the attitude a lot of people have. I've gone to a lot of these protests, the No Kings and the hands-off protests that have happened. Is good to see a lot of people out there, but there are a lot of what I would call, the active left that would show up to any protest. What's keeping the big middle out? I believe, again, is this feeling that nothing really matters. Like the old Bohemian Rhapsody. Nothing really matters. Anyone can see. So we need to disabuse ourselves of this notion and to start to understand that the power does come from the people. We're just waiting for that leader. That one leader who's willing to step up and tell us that it's time to go for broke. It's time for massive strikes. Not one-day walk-offs. Not single-day, single-product boycotts. It's time to shut shit down. But nobody wants to step up to shut shit down because they're all so busy just trying to stay alive, trying to keep food on the table. We've so decimated our social safety net that nobody wants to go on strike for fear they'll lose their mortgage, lose their health care. There's too much pain in it for us to have a mass uprising in this country. And I'm afraid the pain is going to have to become much greater in our day-to-day lives before the pain of protesting and striking seems reasonable in comparison. And that's why I fear seeing all of these National Guard being posted up in the blue cities. Why I fear FEMA money being moved to the mega churches to upgrade their security. I do. I fear that whole megachurch thing. I can just see scads and scads of these pious, religious, suburban megachurch bros in their F-150s and F-250s feeling deputized to set up checkpoints and stops. It is coming. I'll be surprised if we have the World Cup here or the Olympics here. I really do think we're setting up, especially as Trump is dying, going into not only narcissistic mortification, but actual mortification, actual death, not just dying a psychic death from embarrassment. It's going to get bad. And I hope people out there are setting up mutual aid networks and getting to know your neighbors, because this is going to be a survival on a community-to-community basis by the time RFK has gotten us all infected, removed all our access to vaccines and medications, cut our health care, let pandemics run rampant, massive unemployment, huge spikes of inflation, interest rates going through the roof. You think the tent cities are bad now? Bad times are coming. Winter is coming. I sure hope Democrats can heed the message and start leading us toward recognizing the power of the people and becoming that party of the people again, so that maybe we can survive past our semi-quincentennial here in 2026.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
Well, that's all the time we've got for this week's Smoke Session. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. News clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by My Bass and My Drum Machine. Which brings us to our post-credits scene. Oh yeah, I gotta catch you up on our hashtag TubiTVNight. Tubi TV, the free app where you can watch TV shows and movies. And no, they don't sponsor me. I'm just trying to find you a way to get some free entertainment. Gotta do something fun for free here. And calling up this a couple of shows that I've been watching on the Tubi TV Night. First one was Lost in Sweden. Interesting little fish out of water sitcom that stars the brother of Amy Poehler. His name's Greg Poehler, and he plays a celebrity accountant, an accountant for celebrities. And one of the celebrities is Amy Poehler, playing herself. Another one is Gene Simmons from Kiss. Aubrey Plaza is another one of his clients. So it's a funny little fish out of water comedy of this guy from New York City who marries a Swedish woman and moves to Sweden. And so, cue your Swedish chef jokes and stuff like that. And it's all right. It's fine. But I watched about 8 episodes and really wasn't compelled to watch anymore. It was just nice. Everybody was just so nice in it. There was nothing very compelling about it. But it was fine. It was fine. The show that I do want to recommend, though, on hashtag Rented Lips, hashtag Tubi TV Night, was this anthology show from 2024 called Masters of Science Fiction. And it's hosted by Stephen Hawking, Professor Stephen Hawking, before he died. Which, just a side note on Stephen Hawking, I always loved it. You know, Stephen Hawking has that little robot voice of his. And then as time went on, the electronic voices, you know, the voice readers and stuff, got better. I mean, you've heard some of them these days. They sound great. They sound like almost human, right? But he never did upgrade his little robot voice, saying that, you know, this robot voice is my voice. This is the voice people know me by, so I'm going to stick with it. I always kind of thought that was neat. So anyway, his little robot voice announces the shows. And so it's an anthology series. They only made 6 episodes. And what they did is they take a short story from a science fiction author and they do that show, right? So I was immediately attracted to episode 3, entitled Jerry Was a Man. Jerry Was a Man is one of my favorite short stories from the science fiction author Robert Heinlein. And little side note about me, I am a Heinlein expert. I have literally read everything Robert Heinlein has ever written. Not just his sci-fi novels, like his essays, his speeches, like, I'm a Heinlein expert. So I was excited to see Jerry Was a Man, because the story of Jerry Was a Man is about a future where we have done genetic engineering so well that we're making designer animals. And so part of the story shows this designer baby elephant they made. It's not a baby elephant, it's a full-grown elephant, but it's a pygmy elephant. So it's only like the size of a dog, right? So this is a future where they got this massive genetic engineering going on. And in it, they have genetically engineered chimpanzees to be smart enough to do brute basic labor. Okay, so the chimpanzees are called Joes. And so these smart Joes can do, you know, work on assembly lines and, you know, basic, you know, tasks. And the story is about how a Joe named Jerry, and the Joes love candies and cigarettes, by the way. That's how they get paid. It's in candy and cigarettes. It's about this Joe named Jerry who is fighting for his life because the Joes, at the end of their cycle, when they're no longer needed, they're just killed and turned into dog food. And so the whole idea is this chimpanzee who has this advanced genetic makeup that makes him a little smarter, is he a man? Is he legally a man? And therefore you can't just kill him. So it's like fascinating from an ethical standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a legal standpoint. Great short story. I recommend reading it. The treatment in this TubiTVNight anthology was great. Anne H. plays the trillionaire woman who orders the elephants, and Malcolm McDowell is the genetic scientist who plays the role, a perfect Heinlein character. He's a perfect Heinlein character. I don't know how else to explain that. But I was a little disappointed in one respect, and that is in the TV show, the Jerry, or the Joes and the Jerry, the Joes aren't genetically modified chimpanzees. They're plasto-humanoids, whatever the heck that means. So they're like, they look human, right? They look like Data from Star Trek, right? They kind of look plastic looking. And that bothered me, and I know why they did it. They probably did it because the visual effects budget of having a bunch of accurate-looking chimps was probably too high, and it would be a lot cheaper to put this plastic mask on a dude, right? So I get why they did that, but it really kind of blew the feeling of the story, because the whole feeling of the story is a chimp a man? How much brain development does a chimp have to be a man? And considering the time at which Jerry Was a Man was written, it was also kind of an allegory about slavery and about the treatment of African Americans. So Jerry not being a chimpanzee in the movie, in the show, kind of blunts the impact a bit. So I give it 4 stars out of 5, but a pretty good story. And I'll check out the rest of them the rest of this week. But I've gone on too long about that. Let me talk about the other couple of things I wanted to get off my chest here. First of all, Gloria Gaynor, you know, the disco singer from I Will Survive. It was her big disco hit. Apparently she's getting a Kennedy Center honor, or is it now the Trump Kennedy Center honor, whatever. And apparently it's been unearthed that she has done over $22,000 worth of donations to MAGA-related causes. So Disco Queen, Gloria Gaynor is a MAGA. First they take YMCA, now they take I Will Survive. It's almost as if the Republicans are so pissed about the gays stealing the rainbow from Noah that they're going to steal all the disco from the gays. And one more note, I saw that Snoop Dogg is in the news. The rapper Snoop Dogg, who was featured in a 2-episode arc on the lesbian drama The L Word. Rapper Snoop Dogg, who showed up to the Video Music Awards with 2 scantily clad women being dragged by a leash that he was holding. That Snoop Dogg. The Snoop Dogg who promoted a series of pornographic videos with him in them. He's not acting in them, doing the act, but he's in the videos narrating and going around the party and such. That Snoop Dogg. The Snoop Dogg who sang "Murder Was the Case They Gave Me" regarding the charges he faced for being involved in a killing that he was ultimately exonerated from. That Snoop Dogg was apparently really upset when he took his granddaughter to see a Pixar movie, and the little girl character in the movie had 2 lesbian moms. He's really upset because the lesbian and the gay is just in everyone's face everywhere. That Snoop Dogg. Yeah, he's upset about all the gay. Yeah. Sure. Uh-huh. It wasn't enough that Snoop Dogg was whore enough to take MAGA money to perform for some MAGA event. Now he's trying to play concerned grandpa over Heather has 2 mommies. Give it up, Snoop. You done jumped the shark. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
You grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it.